This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. You know, every day there's something new. Every day you go, how much further, how much worse, how crazier can the Republican folk take us? Saw the story today, Donald Trump. Now understand, former president of the United States, publicly siding with a dictator of an adversary, while at the same time you got a congresswoman saying, yeah, we should have civil war. You know, I'm in this weird kind of, you remember the America First people? You remember the flag waving folk? You remember them? You remember Country First? You remember that? Wow. What a day. Yeah, Donald Trump defended the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un and criticized our having a joint military operation with the South Koreans. He said Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who I got to know, remember, love letters, and got along with very well during my years as president, is not happy with the U.S. and South Korea doing big training and air exercises together. He feels threatened. Even I would constantly complain that the South Korea pays us very little to do these extremely expensive and provocative drills. It's really ridiculous. Now understand, the idea of holding these joint drills is because North Korea is an enemy. And that's kind of the point. So that you go, hey, how about not, shooting nukes at us? How about not shooting nukes across the line there into the South? How about, not? And yet we've got a former president publicly defending publicly calling, I don't know what the thought process is here. But again, I guess I'm not supposed to. I mean, you've got a Republican Party right now torn. As I'm reading the reports, there's a Republican Party that's torn over supporting Putin and Russia or us. And I'm going, I never thought I would live to see the day that would be what's in front of us. Now, look, understand, we've always had the Southern folks who want to refight the Civil War. In fact, one of the first conversations I had when I moved to the area that I live in was with a guy who was a Civil War enactor. Had the big blue X up on his pole and everything. And, this the war of northern aggression, and the South's going to rise, all that stuff. And not surprising, look, this is not new. Republicans have been flirting with this and dangling the carrot out in front of a lot of these folks for a very long time. I mean, I look at presidential hopeful Nikki Haley, who it's now been uncovered again that back in 2010, she defended states and their right to secede. She defended South Carolina for its Confederacy History Month and the Confederate flag flying out in front of the Capitol. And again, political expedience. And again, this is one of those moments where you go, does she believe this? To her core, is this a truly sincere, my favorite phrase from the sincerely held belief. Is this one of those? This is one of those sincerely held things? Or is this just BS that plays to the base? Now, I don't know about Nikki Haley. I'm not sure which side of this she's on. I know she said it. I know that the words came out of her mouth. I don't know if she really to her core believes it. Now, when I hear, people like Marjorie Three Names, when I hear Marjorie Taylor Greene say, we need a national divorce, which is the new code for civil war, it makes me go, she knows exactly what she's saying. And I believe she wants that. And it's gotten some interesting responses because I said, look, the reality is the way the federal government takes money in from all the states and then divvies it back out, redistributes it. Southern states, red states, they take more from the federal government than they put in. That's a fact. That's just the reality of how things work out. In fact, one poll showed 7 of the top 10 states being red states that take more from the federal government. Another one, because of how they view Maine, said 7. However you view Maine as a red state or a blue state or somewhere in between. So we'll say 7.5 of the top 10 are red states. And I simply said that, hey, I'm in favor of cutting that off, that you shouldn't get more than you put in. And that the excess money should be put into reserve. Maybe pay the debt off. I mean, that's something that red state leadership scream about. That's something that Republicans are losing their minds over. So how about we not give those states the excess and we pay our bills at home? How about that? Now, that's not going to fly because, these red states have been on the welfare wagon for quite some time. But they love pitching that, it's the welfare queen. They've been trying to bring the welfare queen back. And you remember the Reagan era welfare queen, the black woman with 17 kids driving around in the topless, pink Cadillac, drinking, Dom Perignon, eating steak every night off of your dime. Remember that? Again, never found her. Never found her. Along with the small family farmer who lost his farm because of the estate tax. But it paints a picture. So today when I got the response, I got a bunch of responses from people. When I said this, the response that came out that I found interesting is that, does this mean, well, we have this national divorce. The red states are going to be red states and the blue states are going to be the woke states. And they'll have all of this woke stuff. A bunch of lazy people who don't want to work. That's their framing. And the belief that and it came out and someone said the quiet part out loud. That, all those black people who take more than they give, they'll move to the blue states. And I'm going, I don't think that's going to happen. I think those people love the states they live in, and they're going to fight for their heritage and their roots just like anybody else. Because understand, there are no absolutely pure red states or absolutely blue states. There's a lot of people on all sides. And this kind of talk is about tearing us apart. This kind of talk is about ripping us to shreds. I found it interesting that a descendant of Robert E. Lee actually came out and said Marjorie Trainwreck Greene's comments were, what did he say, treasonous? Because he understands, the family lineage understands what she's saying. But it comes back to this idea, and look, it's the war between the states has been going on for a very long time, and Republicans have been winning it. Because someone reminded me that, all the farm subsidies go to these red states. All of the military bases that got shut down during the BRAC commissions, a lot of them were in blue states and saved because they needed the jobs. A lot of federal investment go to southern and red states because those folks understand. You got to bring home the bacon. You got to make sure that you fight for the workers in your area. And it's one of those things where someone had said to me, if you pulled all that money out, these areas would collapse. And I agree. You pull the federal money out of a lot of these red states, and their economies would collapse because food stamps, the reverberation effect is off the charts. When money goes to the local grocer, it then reverberates through the entire economy. But we can't talk about that because the quote unquote producers, they feel that they're entitled. If you want to talk about real entitlement reform, how about we talk about all the subsidies we give to corporations and we give to the very wealthy? How about we talk about that? But that's not what this is about. This is an ideological realignment. And what they want to live in their little ideological paradise. They want to be around people just like them. And to be honest, there's part of me, just from a pure, mental kind of a exercise, I would love to play that game out and see where it goes. Now, there have been moments of the past, and I point to, I guess it was maybe about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer. But I remember back in 2020, there was a story about Grafton, New Hampshire. And Grafton, New Hampshire was, it was one of the libertarian, wet dream list places to visit. And there was a push in New Hampshire to get all these libertarians and these free staters to go and to move, to take over a state, to do exactly what Marjorie Three Names wants, to really make a state as crazy and as right-wing and, live free or die, that kind of stuff. This is the state motto. That whole curmudgeon, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Screw the government, screw those authority types. I'm going to do what I want to do. And they did. They moved to Grafton, and they got rid of all those onerous rules and regulations, and people could do whatever they want. They, go to Grafton, they said. Feed the bears, boxes of donuts, they said. Go to Grafton. Don't put lids on your garbage cans, they said. You know, because it's my right. It's my right to do whatever I want. And do whatever you want, they said. And what I find interesting is the story, this is the funny story here. They wiped away all these rules that were in place to help keep the giant bears from coming and taking over the town. So as you were the nice lady feeding the bears the donuts, and you missed a day, are you surprised that the bear is now in your living room eating you? You know, when the garbage cans don't have a lid on it, are you surprised at 2 o'clock in the morning that they're digging into and causing a mess and a ruckus? Are you surprised at all of and that when you don't have simple rules and regulations in place that are meant to prevent certain behaviors that have predictable outcomes, that you have chaos? And this is, again, you know, these people they have this, I'm going to live in a place, people just like me, you know, as crazy as I am, without understanding that the sad reality is we don't all get to do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want. We live in a society with others. And this is where the weird moment is. Because, you know, as we start down this road, how crazy now this is where I would love to see some of this exercise. I would like to see ideological places of all, you know, white evangelical crazy people in one spot. You know, as woke as you can get over here. You got Wokistan over there. And I would love to see how they interact and figure out how to exist. Now, the thing I got all the time is, you know, the red states create all the food. No, they don't. There's a lot of mythology. There's a lot of belief that is so wrong. California is the largest food producer in the country. So, you know, by a lot. And the amount of food produced by the red and blue states are about the same. This idea that the red states are the producers is ludicrous. But again, you got this belief because you've got a media structure that keeps feeding this poison. And it used to be in the past that this stuff was always out there. Because look, I've been talking about, you know, making a provision to say you don't get more than you put in. If you're against ensuring that you have a social safety net, if you're against education for all, if you're against a bunch of stuff, we shouldn't be giving you a bunch of federal dollars. If all you're going to do is take the tax breaks that we're giving you to invest in things, you know, like healthcare, education, people, and you give it to a handful of rich people, I'm sorry, we can use that money better somewhere else. Bad policy should not be rewarded. And I've been saying this for years. The difference was years ago, we didn't have as crazy of leadership. And my problem is with our leadership. People like Marjorie Three Names and Boebert, people like Gosar and Gomert, people like my congressman, Scott Pardon Me Perry. These are people who they're not leaders. Most of them are attention seekers. Hey, look at me. But most of them are ideologues bought and paid for by the handful, the wealthy. And the working class always gets screwed. Because here's the thing. The people who are saying, you know, those people are going to move to the woke states, implying that lazy people will go to blue states because blue states have a better social safety net. We take care of people a lot better. The implication is that, well, you know, all the welfare lazy people will go and be in the blue states, and it's ludicrous. Because again, we know, you know, food stamp programs overwhelmingly go to red states in big ways because they have a lot of poor people. And my problem with this whole divorce idea, I know who gets hurt. It's not Marjorie Greene. It's not Lauren Boebert. It's not any of the people calling for this stuff. It's poor people. It's working people. And this ideological nonsense, because the majority of the country doesn't want to see the United States being the 6 countries that everyone claims we are, because that leads to, well, war. Because I'm reminded, you know, red states got more guns. Maybe. I think the blue state folk are catching up. But is that the country we want to live in? And is this the image we want to project? Everyone agrees. We got problems internationally. Russia, China. This kind of division at home, not helpful. Not at all. And to have national leaders calling for civil war, have a former president siding with a foreign dictator. We are definitely not on the right track. Want to hear your thoughts. Would a divorce be possible? I guess is there a possible way to divorce us from each other? Maybe something Marjorie Three Names knows a little bit about here recently. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I talked about federal entitlements and how a lot of these southern states, they feel entitled to it. All the military bases we've left open in these red states, all of the federal investment, all of the money that's gone down there. And let's not forget all of the Social Security and Medicare. Remember, the entitlements. I found it interesting that former Speaker of the House, former Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, angry at both Biden and Trump for putting the financial risk of the country at financial risk because they've sworn off changes to Medicare and Social Security. He said Biden and Trump, I lump them in the same sentence. Biden and Trump are doing the opposite of leadership. They're trying to scare people, and they're playing political demagoguery with one of the most important issues facing our country this century. Yeah, stealing Social Security and Medicare from Granny evidently is the most important issue. Now, remember, the Republicans freaked out at the State of the Union. And because nobody's ever called for us to destroy Social Security and Medicare. Nobody ever has. I had people saying, name one person, and I would name 10. And they, name one more. And then I'll name one more, Mike Pence. Evidently, Pence is now out saying that we need to do some things. He said we're looking at a debt crisis in this country over the next 25 years that's driven by entitlements, and nobody in D.C. wants to talk about it. It should be on the table, and he's got this whole long term we should talk about it. So kids, that means you. If you're under 40, that means you. They're going to screw you out of Social Security because, hey, they've created this crisis, and Republicans never miss an opportunity to use a good crisis. And this is one of those things where you go, how does this happen? This happens because the wealthy want it. Now, I go back to the George Carlin bit. Some 20 years ago where he was saying, look, they want your Social Security money. They're going to get it. They're going to get it back. And they're going to give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. This has always been the play. The play has always been privatization. The play has always been to take money out of your paycheck, to put into a risky plan to say, let my hedge fund take over. You'll be fine until the next collapse. Privatization has never worked out the way they've sold it. But again, we keep, like the idiot who walks up to the guy with the 3 cards and thinks he's gonna this time I'm gonna beat the dealer. You never beat the 3-card money dealer, never. And this is it. They're selling us snake oil, and they're doing it because this is what the wealthy want. And I point to Ron DeSantis, who evidently just got a 7-figure donation from Jeffrey Yaz, the trader, investor, whatever, education destroyer, whatever you want to call him. Gave him $2.5 million to their state political committee in the name of Friends of Ron DeSantis. Also, DeSantis got $1 million each from Jude and Christopher Reyes. Again, these are the wealthy of the wealthy in this country, choosing who they want to be in power positions so they can do what? Oh, yeah, whatever they want them to. And, this is one of those weird kind of moments where you go, they have to divide us. They have to pit us against each other. There's no way forward for them. I say all the time, we've outprocreated them. There are more of us. They may have all the money, and that's true, but there's more of us. So what do you have to do? You have to divide and conquer. Not rocket science. Don't need to be a genius. Don't need to have a crystal ball or a law degree from some Ivy League university. But the more we fight over nonsense, the more we're I look at some of the comments, and I know social media isn't reality. Social media is full of people who are the worst versions of themselves, most of the time just trying to make the other person look bad. And it's interesting. It's really interesting, the number of people who are now experts with, little blue check marks who have like 3 followers. There's something to that, and we'll get to that later. But it's one of those things where face-to-face talk stuff, you don't get into this kind of mud. And there's an opportunity. I think face-to-face, people want to find common ground. When you believe there's some anonymity and you're behind a curtain, that's when you're going to be a lot more willing to be disagreeable. And maybe we do need to come back into the square. Maybe we need to talk to people face-to-face. I tell my kids all the time, when we were kids, we worked things out. There were no parents, there were no cameras, there were no police, there were just a bunch of kids. And you learned your place, you learned what you could say, what you couldn't say. As I've said, when we stopped letting little 5-year-old boys beat each other up in the sandbox, things went off the deep end. Because that respect is gone. And I go back to this whole talk about we're going to secede. It's nonsense. It's idiot talk. It's never going to happen, and the majority of the country doesn't want it to happen. But you know what they can do with it? They can pit us against each other with it. So you go, oh, those lazy blue states or those lazy red states, and they can get us. Look, I don't want a national divorce. This country is only as great as the weakest Marjorie Trainwreck, Lauren Gun Fetish Barbie, any of them. They are literally tearing us down. Our job is to ignore the noise and move forward. That's what we need to be working on. That's what we need to be focusing on. Rebuilding, reviving, reuniting, reunionizing, sharing the wealth, building for the future. That's what we need to be doing. But I guess it is fun to have this exercise and this mental game around, what if we did get a divorce? Still lunacy. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2004. That was the day Secretary of Education Rod Page stated that he considered the National Education Association to be a terrorist organization. He made the remarks during a meeting with governors who were visiting the White House. His apology a few hours later was just as inflammatory. There he expressed his frustration at the, quote, obstructionist scare tactics the NEA's Washington lobbyists have employed against No Child Left Behind's historic reforms. Representing almost 3 million educators, the NEA had been fighting many aspects of the No Child Left Behind Act passed by Congress in 2001. The teachers' unions had initially supported the measure, but they came to realize that the act was designed to undermine public education in favor of charter, private, and religious schools. No Child Left Behind mandated regular standardized testing of students. It also threatened financial penalties and school closures. Governors on board with the goals of the act soon union grew frustrated. The Bush administration reneged on federal funding necessary for its implementation. The union movement was outraged at Page's smear. John Sweeney, then president of the AFL-CIO, said, quote, "The Bush administration would like to label all those who disagree with it as terrorists in order to cover up its policies, which are harmful to working families and to divert attention from its inability to create good jobs." By 2015, the No Child Left Behind Act had received so much criticism from every corner that the Every Student Succeeds Act replaced it. This act retains Common Core standards but transfers school accountability to the states. It is now pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive. In 2017, it was pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive.
No one needs another outrage to worry about, but here's one that could literally be your last worry. Our hospitals are killing us. Not that the staffers are going room to room snuffing out patients, of course, but hospital owners and top executives are nonetheless killing thousands of ill Americans entrusted to their care. They are doing it by deliberately short-staffing their facilities and short-changing sick and injured people they're richly paid to serve. At the core of this outrage is a fatal structural flaw in our healthcare system, namely that these are no longer our hospitals. Instead of being public or nonprofit entities for the common good, focused squarely on patients, hospitals today tend to be private operations controlled by corporate profiteers. Pitting patients against profits is no way to run a hospital, for it means money will ultimately rule over health and over life itself. Ask a nurse. These dedicated professionals are the solid pillars of American health. More than doctors and way more than administrators, nurses make a hospital function, providing the primary care and constant on-site monitoring that are the essence of an ethical, healthy system. Yet, thousands have already fled the work they love. Another third plan to leave this year, and thousands more are going on strike. Why? Because the profit system demands massive staff cuts, leaving way too few nurses to meet the basic needs of patients, causing burnout among nurses and unnecessary deaths of people they care for. A damning 2021 study revealed that forcing fewer nurses to tend to an ever larger caseload effectively killed more than 4,000 New York hospital patients in the previous 2 years alone. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet the corporate powers insist on treating nurses as just a cost to be cut, arguing that hospitals must have staffing flexibility. In other words, cut nurses, raise profits.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Donald Trump was in East Palestine, Ohio today. Brought some water with him. A couple of pallets of water, some cleaning supplies. I was waiting for another iconic moment of, throwing paper towels at people so they can get to work cleaning that mess up. Because, again, this is another example, and to me, this is another example of Trump's bringing supplies so those folks can clean up the mess that corporate America has created. And my goal in all of this is making sure that they pay every dime to clean up that mess and to make those people's lives whole. And I'm sorry, $1,000, that ain't going to cut it. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on Trump's visit to East Palestine and where things are at the moment. I've asked Clyde Whitaker to come talk with us. He's the chairman and state legislative director for the Ohio State Legislative Board for the Smart Union Transportation Department. That is a mouthful. Clyde, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, were you in East Palestine today for the big Trump visit?
Was not.
Probably missed the traffic that his visit caused. And when I saw this, I'm going, this is what happens when narcissists get involved, because there's not anything he can really bring to be helpful. I guess a couple of pallets, a pallet of water, and some cleaning supplies. But the traffic and the headache and all of the chaos, I got to imagine that's not helpful for the area.
No, that area has been through a lot. We've paid a visit to some of the people there. We did a community outreach several days after the event. Talked to, like I said, several people. It's a very sad situation that those people are in, and it really bothers me to the core on that.
Yeah. Now, as I've been watching the media coverage over the last several days, when you got Republican House members coming out and attacking the administration because evidently this is all Joe Biden's fault. I had a listener actually tell me that there's a super secret executive order that Biden signed to derail the train, so we would stop talking about balloons. Um, let's talk about the derailment because I want the focus to be back where it belongs. It's not on the administration's response. They responded as we respond to anything. But it seems to me that the responsibility and the messaging has been taken away from Norfolk Southern and again projected somewhere else. The person responsible here, Norfolk Southern.
Absolutely. Um, you know, during this era of PSR, precision scheduled railroading, there's been a lot of cutbacks. All the workforces, different crafts, the maintainers of the equipment, train and engine service, signal department, mechanical forces. Everybody's been cut to bare bones. Everybody's very fatigued right now. The railroads need to hire more people. They need to retain more people. I mean, I've had members with 20 plus years of service leave the industry. I even had one of my legislative reps here in the state, 27 years service. Was 3 years away from meeting retirement. He left because he couldn't deal with it anymore and how unsafe the railroad was being. So
Yeah, this is one of those situations that over the summer we were talking to people about the contract fight and all this stuff, and safety kept coming up. And what I find interesting is we're in a moment right now where we're talking about safety procedure, we're talking about the media coverage, we're talking about government response. We're not talking about management's decisions. And the fact that you brought up precision scheduled railroading, that should be the focus of this. And this is where I've had conversations with Democratic politicians going. The focus is what this industry does to working people. This is what we need to be talking about, putting them in situations that they can't possibly meet the requirements. I had one of your co-union guys tell me here not too long ago that inspections have been cut down from like 3 minutes down to 90 seconds. How do you inspect anything in 90 seconds?
So what I've learned by talking to people in the mechanical forces during this event, there are over 200 components on one rail car. The industry standard was anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes for inspection of a car. These carmen, they use specialized gauges. I'd spoken to one reporter, and they're kind of like, well, hey, the conductor, he or she can inspect equipment, right? I said, yes, that is correct. But look at it this way. The mechanical forces have the doctorate degree, so to speak. They know the ins and outs of every part on that car, whereas a conductor has, the equivalent of associate's degree. We know the basics and what the railroad teaches us. We know how to do fundamental repairs. We know how to look for major things wrong with the rail car. But mechanical forces in rail yards right now, they've been cut down to nothing. One rail yard here in Ohio, we have conductors do an initial terminal test, class 1 brake test. Typically, that's always been 2 carmen walking the train set and doing the inspection with their gauges. We don't know how to use those gauges. We don't know how to measure the wheel, tread depth of the car, measuring the brake shoe. We don't have those tools of their trade, and that should be them doing that. And the railroads just making a buck and rolling the dice on public safety and even every railroader's safety for that point.
Yeah. No, I'd read not too long ago that I think it was like 2008 to 2018. The train lengths have grown by 25%, and I can't imagine from 18 till now that they haven't grown probably another 25%, and because we're getting longer and longer trains. And I had someone on the show last week say, look, even the way that we're loading the trains is different and causing unsafe conditions. And again, we hear a lot about the word safety, but it comes down to managerial decisions. It comes down to what these companies are forcing on you guys. And again, I don't know how in 3 or 4 minutes or 90 seconds how you inspect anything. Look, I've been a truck driver. I've been in the trucking industry over 30 years. When we do pre-trips, I can't imagine doing a 90-second pre-trip on our brake system, and that's just one little trailer. I don't know how you do it on these big trains.
So the carmen, uh, they're being told 60 seconds or less, and that doesn't even give you enough time to walk around the damn car. Pardon my French there,
No, the big
but
cars, I couldn't walk around it in 90 seconds.
I mean, some of them are upwards to 100 feet. Some of them are 5 car sets that are 250 feet or 300. Um, I have several friends in the trucking industry, and this has come up. One of my buddies like, man, it takes me about 10 minutes or so to do a pre-inspection on my trailer picking up. And I said, man, 1 minute for a rail car, we got hazardous materials in this car. I mean, we should be taking the time for public safety and our own to do this, but there's repercussions if a laborer takes a stand. I mean, they're threatened with subcontractors coming in to take their job. They're threatened with discipline. They're threatened with their livelihoods here. I mean, they got to feed their families and make mortgages. This ain't the way we should be doing business in this country, and this is all corporate greed.
No, and that's the message coming out of this. And no matter how much it costs for Norfolk Southern to clean up this mess, I guess this is the way I should ask this. Depending on how much it costs to clean up this mess, are they going to lose money or save money? Because this all comes down to how much risk are we willing to take? Because we keep hearing people say, well, corporations are going to do what's in their best interest. They're not going to put things at risk that's going to cost them more than they make. Now the railroads make a ton of money. This risking your safety or their profits.
So good point on that. Since last summer, I've been collecting data here in Ohio on defect detectors, and it was brought to my attention that a crew had a train with a lot of hazardous materials in it. The defect detector sounded an alarm. The train crew was running short on time, which they only have 12 hours to work. This train's on single track railroad, so you can't pass this train if it stops. You can't get any other trains around it. The line is plugged, especially if they find something wrong. So the conductor took action. He started to walk the train. The chief dispatcher ordered the conductor back to the front end of the train. The conductor and the locomotive engineer traversed 7 more miles going over a body of water to double track mains. So at that point, that conductor was allowed to stop and walk his train. But then here comes another curveball. This crew's running short on time at this point. They got to reach destination. So now we got Amtrak coming down the track at track speed, 50 mile per hour. Let Amtrak check your train out. Okay, first off, Amtrak deals with passenger service. They have passenger equipment. I've been on a railroad 23 years. I don't know what I'm looking at on a passenger car to tell if they have defects unless I see a fire or spark or hear something. So this guy goes by 50 miles per hour. What's he inspecting? A blur? I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on a train, but when you're passing another at that speed, looking out a window in a straight direction, it's a blur.
Yeah, it's you're just going right on by. Yeah, I know.
So,
that's the inspection?
Yeah. So
Seriously?
So the Amtrak conductor says, "Hey, train looks good. Don't see anything wrong." So this train continues on down the line a little bit more. They get nailed by another defect detector. He walks the train this time. He's allowed to do his job. He's empowered to do his job finally, right? Now, a few things I see wrong with this so far. One, we went across a body of water with hazardous materials. We could have poisoned the water system here, damaged the environment, and put the Amtrak train in danger. Who knows how many passengers were on that? But this chief dispatcher rolled the dice on it, right? We're either going to make a profit today, get this train across the railroad. I'm going to get a little pat on the back. I did a good job, right? That's what upper management's going to tell this chief train dispatcher. So the conductor walks back, finds a couple of handbrakes that were on the rail cars. The bearings were hot, but not as hot to the critical point. But still, in fact, what if? So my take on this, you can find the railroad all day long. It's a drop in a bucket. Whatever number you throw at them, it's a drop in a bucket. They make billions of dollars. Even during the course of a global pandemic, a broken supply chain, they're making a buck. And they're going to continue to make a buck. What we need to focus on here is upper management and managers making terrible decisions. Those people need a personal fine to them, not the rail company, a personal fine to that manager to stop making bad decisions that endanger my membership, the other organization's membership, and the general public overall. You're putting the supply chain in danger. You're putting communities, buildings, property in danger too. And that would cease some of the problems that we've got.
Now, the comments about the braking have come up a number of times, and I don't know. Look, we don't have the official report, but there was some stuff during the Trump era that undid some regulations. We now find in Ohio that they lobbied heavily, to stop any regulation. To me, this is another example of the deregulation crowd, taking risks with all of our health and safety so that these corporations can make a buck. For me, the culprit here is deregulation. It's not about Trump. It's not about the Ohio Republicans individually. It's about all of them. It's about this ideology that corporate America is going to do what's in the best interest, of themselves, because they fear they're going to be sued. But I don't see that as a fear here. As you said, these guys make enormous amounts of money and all the time put us in danger. When do we get the message that maybe deregulation isn't the answer?
Well, that's a very complex question. I think that goes above my pay grade, but something's got to be done here. DOT needs to, take a step. I mean, I understand how lobbyist money works, obviously, and helping people out, should say.
So let me ask you about that. You know how lobbyist money works. I keep getting people, well, the unions got lobby money. The unions are lobbying for this. What's the difference between the money that labor spends on lobbying to keep workers safe and how much management lobbies to not?
Well, typically, if I write if I write a PAC check here on the state level, my max is $500. All right, the railroad's going to do their max contribution in the thousands mark. So, if every union member contributed, I think $1 a day, we would outspend the railroad sevenfold. But it's a voluntary program, right? And contrary to popular belief, your union dues with our organization does not go toward political funding whatsoever. That's against the law, as far as I know. It's a volunteer fund. So I wish I could drop $1,000 on a legislator and open that door. Yeah. I mean, that's what PAC money does. It opens a door up for a listening ear.
Well, what we know is Norfolk Southern gave $10,000 to Mike DeWine's inaugural campaign, his inaugural festivities, and also I guess like $29,000 in his run for governor. So we know that they're giving them big money, and it's not even a lot when you think about the amount of when these regulations go into place. That does take people off of trains. Because when I was a kid, I remember there were 6, 7, 8 people on a train. They had cabooses back then. Now we've got software.
Right. And I'm the 6th railroader in my family, so I'm kind of probably the last one, because I'm going to tell my son don't do it.
Yeah. So last line of questioning I've got for you, because ultimately, we want to hold people accountable. These people who are struggling in East Palestine, the environmental degradation and the destruction that's happening. All of this stuff, someone's going to have to pay for it. And sadly, throughout the years of this country, it's usually the taxpayers who get screwed with all of the external costs because of these disasters. How do we hold this railroad accountable?
Well, from what I've read, Governor DeWine, J.D. Vance, I know Sheriff Brown, he will do everything in his power to hold the railroad accountable. It seems like everybody's saying, hey, we're going to hold the railroads accountable. So how do you do that? They're all going to have to stick together and work it out bipartisanship on this one, I think.
Yeah, so. It's interesting because as I've been pointing out here the last several days, Republicans are running, they're running cover for the railroad by saying, look at Buttigieg isn't here, or the president didn't show up. All the resources. Let me ask you this. I know I said the last question, but in the response, I'm looking at how the federal government responded, and they responded as by the letter of the law. When the governor requested something, he got it. When he didn't get it. It seems to me that what's being thrown out is a lot of BS simply to project responsibility somewhere else. So we stop focusing on the fact that this is a managerial problem. This is a problem with these railroads.
So with that, and I do agree with that, I think we're missing the big picture here on a lot of things that we can make change on. Right now, the door is open. We have two different types of defect detectors, from my understanding. We'll take, for instance, a standard defect detector. They all can have different combinations of technology. And this is a good tool, but it's not always effective. They can scan for hot wheels, bearings, dragging equipment, whatever the case may be. We also have what's called a trending defect detector. These do not send an alarm to the train crew operating the train. It is a silent alarm that goes to a wayside desk at the central dispatching system. And who knows what this person's doing with the data? They're watching this car heat up as it goes down the tracks. If that car goes into a siding waiting for several hours for other trains to pass, it's going to take a while for that car to heat back up. But nobody's telling the train crew about this, that, hey, we see something's going wrong with this car, let's keep an eye on it. So these cars heat up, we have issues with them. And again, managers are telling these trains to keep going, committing an unsafe act. Yeah. That's not on the train crews, that's on management at that point. But we want to make the right decision. But
at the end of
there needs to be regulation on that.
Again, this comes back to the decisions that are made not on the train, and that's a problem. Right. I grew up in an era where if you're moving a vehicle, you're the captain of the ship. You make those decisions, not some pencil pusher in a room somewhere, way away from you where you are. You're the captain of that ship, and we need to get back to that. For me, we should have the Captain of the Ship Act of 2023, so this never happens again. Just my thoughts. But Clyde, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Yeah, anytime.
Good stuff. Appreciate the time. Clyde Whitaker, he is the chairman and the state legislative director for the Smart Unions Transportation Division. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that the shoemakers of Lynn, Massachusetts walked out on strike. The shoemakers were very concerned over how technology was changing their work. Shoemaking had long been considered a skilled craft. Making shoes was typically done as piecework in the homes of the craftsmen. Often, other family members, including the women of the household, helped to make the shoes. But technological advances transformed the industry. The introduction of the Singer sewing machine in 1852 moved more shoemaking into factories. Many young women went to work stitching at these machines. What was once considered highly skilled work was now transforming into mass production. Then, to make matters worse, in 1857, a depression swept across the nation. Shoemakers saw their wages slashed. In response, on George Washington's birthday, the shoemakers went out on strike. They demanded an industry-wide standard wage. 20,000 workers joined the strike. 20,000 more supported the striking workers at protests and parades. 2 weeks into the conflict, women from the factories took to the streets, joining the strike. But the male shoemakers were weary of joining their cause to that of the women. Predictably, this division aided in causing the strike to falter and fade. Although the strike was not successful, it drew national attention to the plight of workers. During the conflict, presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln spoke out in support of the workers. He said, "I'm glad to see that a system of labor prevails in New England in which laborers can strike when they want to, where they are not obliged to labor whether you pay them or not. I like a system that lets a man quit when he wants to and wish it might prevail everywhere." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, interesting Washington Post story today grabbed my attention. You know, we do a lot of social media here on the program. You know, we reach a bunch of people with where we can. And, you know, ever since Elon Musk took over Twitter, I've noticed a lot of much more, coordinated messaging. And look, I've always said that you've got your bot farms, you've got your troll farms, you've got your Russian propagandists, you've got your, you've got all around, you've got your groups of people who do their messaging. But it's really ramped up now that Musk has taken over. And as the Washington Post points out, quote, accounts pushing Kremlin propaganda are using Twitter's new paid verification system to appear more prominently on the global platform. Another sign that Musk's takeover is accelerating the spread of politically charged misinformation. And you go, yeah. I look at somebody with 2 followers who's got the little blue check mark because they're verified because they paid their $8 or $9 or whatever it is to get the little blue check mark. And interestingly enough, their messages are all the same. And it's that that Christian conservative mom from Dubuque, Marjorie 30 characters behind her name. Interesting, a little name and then a bunch of numbers. Generally, something that was automated, something that was created. But it's interesting that they're all on the same page and spreading disinformation. Now, in the past, when people were on my Twitter feed, they would email me, and I get emails from some people. But none of these people actually do. And for me, that's kind of the test on who the trolls are and who the propagandists are and who's actually real. Just an interesting thought. Don't spend the $8 on the blue check mark. Definitely not worth it. Back after this.
The impact of rising seas is already creating new sources of instability and conflict.
Sea level rise set to displace nearly 1 billion people in coming decades, UN warns. Ice coverage of the Great Lakes hits record low. Plus, Biden EPA restores limits on toxic mercury pollution rolled back by Trump.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Ohio officials are trying to get folks to come back home, reassuring residents that the air in East Palestine remains safe to breathe. Yes, pay no attention to your lying lungs. The tingling means the air is working.
This is your 14th anniversary Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, happy 14th anniversary of the Green News Report.
Thank you to you too.
Now beginning our 15th year of connecting the climate crisis dots in a way that really no one else in the nation over our public airwaves has done consistently for 14 years now. By the way, 100% listener supported. Congratulations to you, Desiree.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Thank you.
Now, on to the news.
Okay.
A series of new studies warn of the long-term destabilizing impacts of rising sea levels. Data compiled by the World Meteorological Organization shows global sea levels have risen faster on average since the year 1900 than in any century in the past 3,000 years. A new study warns previous projections of sea level rise underestimate the risk, finding that twice as much land in developing nations will be inundated by rising seas than previously predicted.
Not good, although scientists have been underestimating all of these problems for, at least 14 years.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the UN Security Council late last week that the rate of sea level rise itself is accelerating and warned of widespread impacts, including saltwater intrusion contaminating drinking water supplies. Guterres called rising seas a threat multiplier that will disrupt and destabilize global society. He said unless there is an organized international effort to get ahead of the problem, 1 in 10 people could be driven from their homes in coming decades.
The consequences of all of these are unthinkable. Low-lying communities and entire countries could disappear forever, and we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land, and other resources.
A different study in Nature Communications warns that in a moderate emission scenario, sea levels will continue rising through at least 2150 and likely thereafter due to the delayed response of the massive Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets. At the current rate, global average sea levels are likely to rise by 3 to 5 feet by 2100. The researchers conclude that because of humanity's delay in cutting fossil fuel use, even if governments achieve their promised emissions cuts under the UN Paris Agreement, quote, it would be insufficient to slow down the rate of global sea level rise.
An average of 3 to 5 feet by the end of the century.
Yep. In other news, widespread devastation in Brazil's Sao Paulo, which was hit with record rainfall of nearly 24 inches in a single day, which triggered deadly flooding and landslides that have destroyed at least 50 homes and killed at least 36 people.
You would think after 14 years I would no longer be surprised by these kind of stories. Amazing.
Several cities in the region have canceled their carnival.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA